Welcome, everyone. Today, we're talking about AI agents in the financial services industry. From collections to anti money laundering, a number of innovative companies are building state of the art agents that can replicate labor intensive processes commonly performed by humans. But a recent study found that large language models, the models at the heart of AI agents, can only match or beat the performance of a human professional about 38% of the time. Researchers tested over 1,300 specialized tasks across industries like financial services and law. Human experts created realistic test scenarios and then blind scored responses from both other humans and large language models to see which performed better. Even the best performing model, Claude Opus 4.1 from Anthropic, only matched or beat human experts less than half the time. And while models keep improving, challenges remain. For example, OpenAI has shared that in third-party red teaming exercises, prompt injection attacks succeeded 56% of the time against ChatGPT and over 90% of the time against Llama. So should we give up on using large language models in financial services? Hardly. Think of large language models like nuclear energy, immensely powerful and transformative, but they need the right tools and safeguards to be used safely. That's where AI agents come in. Some joke that an AI agent is just 3 prompts in a trench coat. But in reality, agents are much more than that. A well-designed agent combines LLMs with traditional elements like rules engines, machine learning models, trusted data sources, and built-in guardrails to make their outputs more reliable and secure. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Rim Shah, the CEO of Arva, one of the companies leading the charge in building responsible AI agents for financial services. Rim will help us unpack why agentic AI might be the key to safely unlocking the power of LLMs in our industry. We've had the chance to work with Arva on validating their AML-focused agentic solutions, and I'm excited for you to hear what they've learned along the way. Rim, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ready to dive in?
Thank you so much, Kareem. Great introduction. And yes, definitely. We're super excited for this partnership with FairPlay. As a very quick introduction for those that aren't aware, here at Arva, we are an AI research company that have developed an agentic AI operating system to automate financial crime compliance operations. And so we work with large banks, fintechs across the globe. And what's incredibly consistent throughout these conversations is a focus on robustness. Exactly why we partnered with FairPlay today.
Rim, let's talk about Arva's approach to building agents. How does Arva build the right framework around the large language model core of its agents?
Yeah, great way to kick it off, Kareem. So I think for us, building robust AI is fundamental to what we do. Everything we do and focus on isn't just about automation and getting to the end efficiency gains, but actually how can we do that in an extremely robust way? For us, we really like to build frameworks around how we achieve that from a build perspective, and it's everything that we get our engineers and researchers to adhere to. I think the first one we like to stick to is the idea that AI, large language models, agentic AI, machine learning, it's only used when you have to, right? And so we actually like to stay away from it unless we absolutely have to. I think there's a lot of use cases we see outside within our space where, folks are using large language models as a one-shot opportunity, right? That's not the goal here. The goal here is only to use agentic AI when you absolutely have to, and everything else can be extracted into binary rules. I think the second thing is ensuring that you're using the right model for the right scenario. So we do a lot of heavy testing. We mix a lot of different, both off-the-shelf models, but also open source models. We also fine-tune and distill, and that helps us really get the right framework in terms of what we use to the best of its abilities. And finally, for us, you can only be so accurate in building robust AI, right? It can only be so effective. And so what's super critical, Kareem, is ensuring that you have a great framework around bailing out, having fail safes, confidence scores, to ensure that even if you have built it in the right way, in that kind of 0.001% chance that something goes wrong, you have a mechanism to bail out. And so for us, part of our big proprietary research effort is how we can actually confidently score the output of agentic AI and large language models, right? We don't rely on large language models for that, but instead we've worked on our own system for actual scoring. And I think that's a key way in which we give confidence to our own customers.
Yeah, at FairPlay, we love this idea of yours related to LLM minimization. With Gen AI becoming such a buzzword, a lot of companies are using large language models in places where a simple decision tree would do just fine. And after one of our first calls with your team, someone at FairPlay described Arva's approach to LLMs as surgical. And I think that's exactly right. You use LLMs for their highest and best purpose and no further. And that kind of precision is the perfect way to balance the risk reward trade off with these powerful tools. We love this idea of yours related to LLM minimization. With Gen AI becoming such a buzzword, a lot of companies are using large language models in places where a simple decision tree would do just fine. And so, after one of our first calls with your team, someone at FairPlay described Arva's approach to LLMs as surgical. And I think that's exactly right. You use LLMs for their highest and best purpose and no further. And that kind of precision is a perfect way to balance the risk reward trade off with these powerful tools. Um, Rim, even the best AI systems can fall apart without good upkeep and governance. How does Arva make sure its AI agents stay safe and well governed over time?
Yeah, definitely, Kareem. So that's again another fantastic question. I think for us, right, we've alluded to how we can build the right product, but at the end of the day, as is the nature of AI and especially large language models, there's always that sense of hallucinations or model drift is always at risk, right? So having a good build is a fundamental part of it, but you also need sort of the secondary fail-safe method, which is covered by process, right? So how do you ensure you have the right process in place such that when things were to go wrong, right, you can catch them before they kind of, have an impact. And for us, we have three primary ways of doing that. Number one is benchmarks. So we actually hire a team of ex-financial crime analysts and officers to work for us within the company, and they're fantastic. They help shape data sets, help create benchmarks, people data, sort of with the ground truth alerts. And really, the goal of doing that is to say, we can trust AI as much as we can, but unless we have a human sort of comparison to compare it against as we release new products, new features, and sort of new parts of our agentic AI use cases, how can we ensure we're testing and measuring it? So every time we release, we always perpetually monitor as well against this set of benchmarks, which has a massive labeled data set of thousands of articles. I think for us as well, when we work with customers, quite a key thing is the idea of releasing recommended verdicts. So there are certain confidence thresholds that you can have for decisions that you make, and I think for features that are more risky or newer, where your confidence may be a little bit lower, you can release them as recommendations as opposed to just blanket automation. And I think this is a good question that I'd love to ask you as well in terms of in the industry itself, how much are you seeing a trust on decision making versus human in the loop?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you stated is very much in line with how we think about validation. I think, what's interesting about agentic validation is that unlike traditional machine learning, where the model is mostly static, here, the model can change over time. And so that's why the safeguards you mentioned, including keeping humans in the loop, can help catch and fix model drift and hallucinations early before they become a real problem. Um, you know, all of your agents are deployed in a space that is heavily regulated and governed by complex rules. Talk me through how you were able to develop workflows within that maze of requirements.
Yeah, it's a touchy topic, especially when you think about the types of risks and alerts that we tend to automate, right? So, we work with plenty of fintechs and banks who have things like high volumes of sanction and OFAC alerts who use us to automate the output of those, right? And so for us, it really gets to a sense of how can we ensure that within these risky areas we're still navigating all the regulation, ensuring there's trust built as well. I think a big part of this is kind of the domain expertise as well. So, I come from a background in financial crime compliance. I used to lead the financial crime product team within Revolut Business, where day in, day out, we used to have a team of 400 or 500 analysts handling and doing these alerts, not just within screening, but also within business banking onboarding, consumer onboarding, and everything in between. So I think having a deep understanding of not just the operational workflows, but also from a second line regulatory perspective, what is required is incredibly important. A big part of the way in which we automate decisions is in line of SOPs, right? So we refer to standard operating procedures. We use those as almost like training guides or books for the agentic AI to run through. right? And again, going back to what I said previously, our goal isn't to take a one-shot approach of where we just dump an operating procedure into a large language model and get it to sort of do sort of the end to the beginning to end approach, but it's really more of a process around how we can how we can use it to extract certain binary rules from, how we can use it to guide the system, the waterfall approach in terms of how an analyst would actually review alerts. So I think it's sort of a strong background in financial crime compliance, along with a very structured, logical way in terms of ingesting how the human sort of approaches an alert is really fundamental to how we navigate this sort of maze of requirements. And I think the final point I'll touch on, Kareem, is the importance of making the governance not just a feature or selling point, but actually fundamental to everything that we do. Right? It's not just a box checking exercise. It is core to what we do, and that is why we have a very strong focus on robustness, and why we're so excited to work with you guys on this.
Yeah, I mean, something that really stands out to us about Arva is, your founder's background in AML gave you a front row seat to the pain points that compliance teams deal with every day. We also are very impressed by how you build your AI agents around kind of standard operating procedures and expert input so that the workflows actually reflect how AML teams work in practice, including some of those tricky edge cases and the common human errors that happen in real investigations. Rim, what do you see as the likely evolution of the agentic AI space over the next couple of years?
So I think for me, Kareem, the one insight I would touch on is as models are getting better and better, as trust is increasing, as banks and generally folks within the regulatory sort of environments, not just financial services, but even broader, right, even in healthcare and other areas. As these models get better and there's greater trust being built, the level of complexity of tasks that are going to be handled is just going to increase over time, right? And so if we take the specific area that we work in, we see actively folks moving from the L1 stage human in the loop to now L1 stage automation, right? So sort of the basic decisions, maybe 6 months to a year ago might have still been handled with AI, but with a sign off from a human. Now we see a lot of those initial reviews being automated completely. And now even we're seeing human in the loop with L2 and L3 cases. And we hope the future really holds an extent of automation within those sort of more complex scenarios too, right? So as we get to more complex investigations, cases that don't take 5 minutes to review, but instead take 10 hours, we can reach a stage of pure automation, or at the very least, turning that 10-hour case into a 5-minute exercise of review. And we're seeing indications of that already around, sort of chief compliance officers, BSA and AML officers getting very excited by the prospect of what they do day in, day out, becoming incredibly more efficient from a day-to-day point of view. I think, along with that, the only reason we can let that happen is because robustness, effectiveness, and governance is becoming even more paramount and is becoming, more relevant, but also definitely better, right? So models are getting more robust. As we're learning as a team and building better products around the use cases, the effectiveness is also increasing. We've seen this with some of our large US banking customers where, the robustness over time from when they first launched to, sort of 3, 4, 5 months down the line, the product itself has improved dramatically. I think the last thing, which is actually incredibly interesting as well, Kareem, is the idea that regulators are really catching up to the idea of agentic AI, right? You have the banks touching with it now and using it. But more so than that, regulators are getting more in tune with the aspect that agentic AI and large language models are core to how financial institutions are going to be powering their operational workforce for the future, right? Not just to replace sort of, the mundane repetitive reviews, but also to catch risks as well, which is the interesting part, right? Risks that perhaps a human team might have missed. And I think, I've even discussed with a couple of regulators about how they're internally using agentic AI and large language models. So not only are they looking to regulate it for, financial institutions around the world, but also within internally how they actually regulate and do those tasks. They're looking to utilize it as well. And I think as they start to do that, they're going to appreciate the power about how, the very folks they regulate are going to have to use it as well. It's a core part of how they.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, clear signs of regulatory interest in generative AI and AI agents. Here stateside, and starting in January 1 of 2026, California will begin regulating companies that use automated decision-making tools to make important decisions about employees or consumers. And that could easily include AI agents that are used in, decision making and high stakes applications. So, these new rules are going to bring a lot of complex requirements, and unless companies can show that a human reviews the AI's output and can actually understand and explain it before making a final decision, it's going to be more important than ever to build agents with kind of compliance and auditability at their core. Rim, thank you so much for joining us today, and for sharing the great work Arva is doing to set the standard for responsible AI agents. At FairPlay, we have always believed that AI should make people more effective, freeing them up to focus on higher value, higher purpose work. And it sounds to us like that's exactly what Arva is doing, helping companies manage scale while keeping human expertise front and center. I have a feeling that Arva is going to play a very big role in shaping the future of the agentic space. And at FairPlay, we are grateful to be along with you on that journey. Rim, to close with a concluding thought, the winners in our space are the ones who are going to build the most robust agents.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with you on that. And I think, we can't do that without, the folks like yourselves at FairPlay who can help us along that journey in building the most robust set of agents for our customers together.
Thanks again, Rim.
Thank you so much, Kareem.